not the iron color, that we're looking for a more grade black. And then clarification on the following items. Additional landscaping, screening the backflow preventer, the detail of the wrought iron window covers, the Rejas, R-E-J-A-S. Particularly screening for any through access through any of the gates. Clarification of a window cut up, probably a detail, the manufacturer's detail. Looking for through mutton bars. And a request that the area above the arch windows be glazed. And that glazing have cut ups similar to that below. That there, in the roof tile, that a solid color be used, but with some variation from building to building. That the window color, the window sash color, to be exact.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call the regular monthly meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission to order for Wednesday, November 19th, 2014. Would you all rise for the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Ms. McGill, would you call roll, please?
Chair Wiscombe?
Here.
K-Spear?
Here.
Clark? Heaton?
Here.
Longstreet? Here. And intern Rodriguez is not present.
Thank you, Ms. McGill. Okay, Ms. Rapp, changes to the agenda?
Chair Wiscombe, we do have several people here to interview for the Golf Advisory Committee and the Street Tree Advisory Committee. And I might suggest to you that you start off your meeting maybe prior to the street tree items by doing those interviews. And then we may have one or two additional people come, and I would suggest that you do them prior to the golf item.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Do we have any written communications or no? Okay. And is anyone here to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? Okay, then seeing as we have no public comment, we're going to move to partial of item number 8, which is advisory committee interviews and appointments. So let's start with the Golf Advisory Committee. You can just come up one at a time to the podium, and if you'd introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to be back. These are all incumbents. Why you'd like to be back on the GAC for another term. We'd appreciate it, and then we'll see if there's any questions. Mr. John Craig, come on up. Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Hi, Madam Chair. Well, thank you for your service. That's what I wanted to say first things, because we know how much everybody gets paid around here, and it's all volunteers, and a lot of work gets done. I've been with the Golf Advisory Board 15 years probably, and vice president probably for 13 of those. Right now, I'm the chairperson for the Players Improvement Fund, and it's very exciting, and we're trying to hammer it out, all the details, and in January, we're going to have 2 at-large members. We're going to recommend them to the GAC, and then hopefully all the documentation, everything's going to be in place on how we go about spending the money from our Players Improvement Fund. Other than that, I'm willing to hang on till I get this thing hammered out, and then we'll go from there. But for the next 2 years, I'd be willing to step up and do a job for you.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anyone on the commission have any questions of Mr. Craig? Okay. Thank you very much, and thanks for your service. I think what we're going to do, which I didn't clarify at the beginning, since we probably won't have everyone here for this meeting, there's another set of interviews in December, and then so the commission will make their appointments in the December meeting after we've heard from all the people that are interviewing. Okay, Golf Advisory Committee. Mo, come on up. Thank you for your service.
It's an honor. My club, the Santa Barbara Women's Golf Golf Club, asked me if I would re-up, and I said, of course. So here I am. I don't know how many years I've done this. I think it's longer than 15.
You wrote down 10 years with a big question mark.
Okay.
So
if you have any questions, I'm a golfer of 55 years, and in fact, I've played 18 holes today, and we had a good turnout, and so and we had some new people there, so it's kind of exciting. So we're going to try to keep up the getting more people to play.
That's great. Just for the record, state your name, Mo.
Maureen, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Maureen Masson.
Okay, that's great.
I just wanted to compliment you on the article in the paper on Veterans Day. I think we all learned a little bit more about you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Thank you, baby.
Okay, thank you very much,
Okay.
and thanks again for your service.
You got a haircut. Yeah, looks good.
Okay, I see. Okay, I see one more here.
Chair Wiscombe, good evening. My name is Dominic Namnath. I am currently the chair of the Golf Advisory Committee. I was part of the group that spearheaded and got the Players Improvement Fund started, and it's now bearing fruit. And so I just want to stick with it for a little while longer. And also, we've got some big decisions to be made this next year, and or two. So I think it's important to continue on. So.
Well, thank you very much for your service, and you've been instrumental in the Players Improvement Fund. That was a mastermind move. I think it's really helped with the golfers that play the course, getting some of the improvements that they ask for. So it's really great. Yes, Ms.
And
Longstreet.
just to all the three applicants, I'd like to say thank you, because I know there's a lot happening right now, a lot in the news, and it's good to have some people with a long history on the Golf Advisory Committee to be looking at the issues with us. So thank you very
Some
much.
longer than others.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Okay, thank you very much. And thanks again to all three of you for doing what you do. It's been kind of a rocky road for the last couple of years, or since the economic downturn, I guess. So, okay, so we're going to move on then to Street Tree Advisory Committee, and I see Mr. Cunningham here. Welcome. Thank you very much for all you do and for serving on the committee.
Well, thank you. It's fun, so I enjoy it, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I don't know how long I've been on the Street Tree Advisory Committee. I may have written something down. Doesn't really matter. I've been a practicing landscape architect in Santa Barbara for 40 years, and during that time have learned a lot about plants and about trees, about street trees. I think I bring a designer's and developer's perspective to reviews of issues when it comes to setback trees as well as street trees. And I do know a lot about trees and how they behave, particularly in restricted spaces, which we have a lot of. I think I'm useful to the committee, and I'd like to serve another term.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Bob, for everything. Questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. So we're going to suspend item number 8 until a little bit before 5 and move on with the agenda. We don't have a youth council report today. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to commissioner committee assignment reports. Just go down the line. Mr. Heaton, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Ms. Longstreet.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council, and they made their recommendations on the capital improvement funding for the next few years. They've also developed a form for reporting issues to track the follow-up. So street lights out and, kind of the physical things that are going on, trash, that kind of stuff. Oh, yes, and I attended the 90th birthday party, as did all of our Park Foundation board members and the staff, and it was an outstanding affair, as it always is, and my compliments to staff for organizing such a beautiful event, and we received many compliments.
Great, thank you. Ms. Clark?
I also attended the 90th plus birthday party and was really pleased with it and the fact that we are recognizing an often forgot segment of our population. I did have a lot of patients the next week who were over 90 and hadn't heard of it, so maybe we can spread the word next year. I also attended the introductory local coastal program meeting, and our first working meeting is tomorrow.
Great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Casebeer.
I attended the mayor's conference on campaign against bullying. It was put on by Mayor Schneider and the Santa Barbara Youth Council out at San Marcos High School. It was well attended, and personally, the one thing that I really enjoyed was the fact that we had 70 essays written by high school and junior high school and elementary school age kids. And that shows me that we do have an issue in our community on bullying. and these kids were willing to put it out there. And a great movie was shown and a spirited discussion afterwards. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. K-Spear. Okay. We didn't have a Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting this month. And I did attend the 90th, and thank you to staff. It was just an excellent event. We had tons of volunteers, I think 45 volunteers. So it was really great. Bibi and I both attended Park Foundation meeting today. And I also, with Ms. Clark, attended the local coastal program update and look forward to delving in on that tomorrow. So, okay. So that closes that, and we're going to move on to commission and staff communications. Ms. Rapp?
Commissioners, really, I just have one brief notice, and that is to let you know that we have one of our staff on in the Recreation Division that has announced their retirement. Kathy Carpenter, who has served as our tennis services coordinator for, I think, probably 13 or more years. And she will be greatly missed. She's been a terrific representation of the city and advocate for tennis in this community, and we are sorry to see her go, but happy for her and her family that she's retiring at this time. So she'll be retiring in December, and then we'll be deciding what we will do going forward. But I did want to let you know, because I know many of you are familiar with Kathy and her work, and she's made presentations here before the commission.
Great, thank you. We all wish her well.
Can I just say one thing? I've been getting some very nice postings on Facebook about the department, and I just wanted to compliment staff for those posts. They're informative, and I think they're a good way of reaching out to the community. So thank you.
Great. Okay. We'll move on to community service recognition, and this is a review of the 25th annual 90th plus birthday party and recognition of the event sponsors.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners. My name is Judith McCaffrey, and I'm Recreation Manager with the Parks and Recreation Department. And I also function as the Foundation Manager for the Park Foundation, which is the department's nonprofit foundation. I'm pleased to be here just to give you a brief overview of the wonderful event we had, the 90-plus birthday party in October. Thanks to the continued work of the Park Foundation and city staff, we were able to bring back the 25th again and have the 25th annual 90-plus birthday party at the Career Recreation Center on Thursday, October 23rd. As you know, this event has a very rich history for our department, and back in 1985 was the very first 90-plus party. It was a group of 25 people that gathered together and formed what they called the 90-plus Club. And every year after that, well, actually 25 times, we've had an event. That event's changed. It's moved to various facilities. It's outgrown city facilities. And over those years, one of the really wonderful aspects of that event that's continued is we've had actually one of our former Park Foundation president and well-known community member, Larry Crandell, has been really involved with that event. Not only has he served as the MC for many of the years, probably close to all of them, but he's also fundraised for that event to make sure that it's continued. Back in 2008, when we had some budget cuts and staff reductions, the event went on hiatus until we could bring it back. And last year, thanks to the support of the Park Foundation Board of Directors, we were able to raise the money to have that event, and this year was our second year of putting it on, and to great success. As I mentioned, Larry Crandell's involvement in this event has always been so critical, and I really the Crandalls have really been the cornerstone of the event. They really make it super special. The past 2 years, Larry is involved, his son Stephen Crandall, who's also come, and not only do they serve as MCs, co-MCs now, but they do a great old-fashioned sing-along with all the attendees. And I'll talk about it a little later. They also go around and interview all the different participants. What's fun about the event this year is we had 260 community members, 90 years and older, who brought a friend or family member or caretaker with them to attend the event. They either came as individuals or they were brought here, transported here by one of the 12 different retirement communities that also participated. So we had a huge crowd, actually 60 more attendees than we did last year. Here's some candid shots. Of course, the day includes a free luncheon for all our honorees, birthday cake, big birthday celebration, and we also had wonderful jazz music playing all those old standards by the band Jazz Plus. Here's a view of the Carrillo Recreation Center. And some candids of some of the participants. Of course, people get up and enjoy some dancing, which also makes it really fun. And as I mentioned, here's really one of the really fun parts of the event when Larry and Stephen go around and interview everyone and ask them, what is their secret to longevity? And we got a lot of really great answers this year. Some of them I want to share. Get up in the morning was always a good one. Look for something good in every day. And my favorite at this year's event was, I've been blessed by the Pope and I've kissed the Blarney Stone. What was also really pretty neat is we had 4 attendees over the age of 100 and older. And we were all set up for a special recognition of those attendees with, as you can see there, with the lady on the right there. We had beautiful, colorful buttons celebrating their years, 100 and over, and balloons and special recognition. So that really made it special. Of course, when you're serving a luncheon to 260 people, you really need a lot of workers. You need an army of volunteers, and we were lucky, as Commissioner Wiscombe mentioned. It's a big job, but we had 46 volunteers this year, either park board staff, city staff, some people from representing some of our sponsors companies, and community volunteers who came forward to help today. Help during the event and make the day really special for all our 90-plus attendees. So here you can see some of our volunteers. Actually, we even had a very large group of youth from our youth programs that came and helped, our job apprentice program that actually came and helped that day, and what great help they were. Of course, this presentation would not be complete without thanking the groups that made this event possible. And certainly I want to recognize our Park Foundation and our board who went out there to raise the funds to put on this event. So thank you to the Park Foundation. And thank you, very special thank you to Hub International, who came forward to be our presenting sponsor for the second year. And it was really, their participation and a large donation that really made this event happen. And then also to our table sponsors. Of course, the Park Foundation Board sponsored a table, Montecito Bank and Trust, Casa Magazine, Sharon Kennedy Estate Management, Garden Court, Easy Lift Transportation, and the Omega Financial Group, all who provided financial sponsorship. And last, I'll leave you with a couple little pictures here to say that we look forward to 2015 when the party will continue, and that the Park Foundation Board is looking forward to ensuring that this event comes back to the Carrillo Recreation Center in 2015. That concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
A nice picture of Sam there. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ms. McCaffrey. That's a great report. And yeah, no, he's not 100. No, Sam is. I think Sam's in his 80s, isn't he?
No, he's in his 90s.
Yeah, that's right. He said he felt like he didn't belong there. That was one of the quotes in the paper. You both, and special thanks to Jason Bryan. I think you all did just a fantastic job pulling that off and herding up the troops and giving out the responsibilities and really making it a smooth running event. Yeah. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for the report.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We look forward to 2015. It's to me, it's one of my favorite events. I just think it's just so much fun, and the people are so thankful when they leave, and we're helping them out to their respective transportation. They're just, that was so much fun. So it was really great. And a special thanks to all our sponsors. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 2 this is the consent calendar. This is summary of council actions. For your information, does anyone have any questions on this or comments? Okay, let's go on to 3, which is approval of the minutes, and this is for the regular meeting on Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014. Does anyone have any questions or discussion or want to make a motion?
I move approval of the minutes for Wednesday, October 22nd.
Okay.
A second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Are you abstaining? Okay. So, taken care of that, and we are on to agenda item number 4A1, which is setback tree removal recommendation. Mr. Downey, welcome.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioners, at 1260 Dover Lane, the applicant is renovating the property, both the building and the landscaping. They are planning to remove some trees if we approve those and put in some new landscaping, which would be a strong benefit to the community. As you can see at the front of this property, it's got several trees that are kind of blocking the visibility of the home. There are 6 trees within the first couple of feet of the property there. So they're trying to thin that out a bit. They're proposing to remove 2 of the giant yuccas that are along the front there, and the cook pine, which is that skinny, taller one a little farther back, that's not very healthy. Staff reviewed the application and determined that the removal of some of the yuccas would benefit not only existing trees to remain, but provide some openness for the proposed plantings. And the condition of the cook pine is poor, and the replacement trees would actually provide a greater benefit to the community. So staff is recommending the approval on the condition that they plant the trees as they propose.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. Okay, does anyone have any questions or discussion on this item? So the staff recommendation is that approval is removed, and under the condition that the replacement trees be installed as per plan. Okay. Discussion?
Move to approve staff's recommendation for the removal of 3 trees at 1290 or 1260 Dover Lane Road.
And would you like to amend that motion to include the replacement?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. So, okay. It's taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Downey. Should we wait till 4:45? I see Mr. Garcia back here. Go ahead with that? Okay. Mr. Garcia, you want to come forward? Yeah, we did, after you left, some applicants came up. So we've done some of the interviews, and I don't know if Brian Henson's going to come today or not, but we'll do you. If you'd introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your service on the GAC, which we thank you for, and why you'd like to continue to serve.
My name's Robert Garcia, and I've served for almost 2 years on the Golf Advisory Committee. I would like to continue serving the community in this capacity. I think we've done a good job. I think we're, have proposed and advice that we have given has been thoughtful, intelligent advice that I think has helped the golf course move forward on certain projects. Certainly the fund money that we're sitting on right now, waiting for rain, is one of the complications now. But no, I just enjoy serving on the committee. I think we do a good job, and I'd like to continue.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone on the commission have any comments or questions? Mr. Garcia? No? Okay, thank you. You weren't here, but just to let you know that we have at least one person that hasn't interviewed yet. And so, we actually could go ahead with the GAC, Ms. Rapp. Should we do that or wait till December? Because once Mr. Henson, you want to come up and, yeah. Yeah. So, Mr. Henson's the last, yeah. Okay. So, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you'd like to continue on the GAC, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. My name is Bryant Henson. I'm a current marshal of 10 years at Muni, and I've served on the Golf Course Advisory Committee for the last 2 years. Now I'm currently going to be seating on the newly formed Players Improvement Fund subcommittee. Thoroughly enjoy golf, thoroughly enjoy City of Santa Barbara, and I continue to having my input and seeing projects develop at the golf course that the players are looking forward to having.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the commission? Okay. Thank you so much. So we've got all the GAC members that have interviewed.
Chair and Commissioners, that would be correct. We have 5 vacancies, and all 5 people that submitted their applications are here. So
we could proceed then?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Can we take them in one motion?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, I move that we reappoint Dominic Namath, John Craig, Maureen Masson, Robert Garcia, and Bryant Henson to the Golf Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay, motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that carries unanimously. Congratulations, and we'll see you at the next meeting, or I'll see you at the next meeting. So,
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so now we are going back to, we're on administrative and staff reports, agenda item number 5, which is the street tree infrastructure conditions report. Ms. Zachary, Ms. Burgess, Mr. Downey, all welcome.
Chair Wiscombe, members of the commission, I'm just going to initiate the presentation and then turn it over to Mandy Burgess. You might be wondering why we're bringing a report like this to you right now, considering the city is in a stage 2 drought, and we've been struggling mostly with caring for our trees and finding ways to increase water efficiency and effectiveness. In fact, we gave council a little update on our Irricade program and some of the other work that we've been doing yesterday. We're bringing it to you today because it's something that we started before the drought was declared back in June. It's something that has been under discussion by the community for many, many years. It became a key issue with our urban forest management plan development. And so we initiated this project because we really wanted to better understand what is the extent of the issues of trees that exist under high voltage lines, in particular because they're more likely to be subject to Southern California Edison pruning, and then also underground utilities. And it's also a way for us to begin to capture how do we plan for the urban forest in the future. We're bringing it back to you now because we want to continue talking about these issues, even though it may not be tomorrow that we initiate our work, but also because it's led us to think more carefully about growing conditions for trees, particularly during the drought. We have, and you will hear during the presentation, many areas of our parkways that are covered in hardscape. And hardscape limits the amount of water and moisture and air that gets to tree roots, and is something that perhaps we could address even if we can't water every tree on a regular basis in the city, because it is an infrastructure improvement. So we bring that to you because there are things that perhaps we could do that may not be planting new trees, but could be getting us towards some of the goals that we would have related to these trees. So as I said just in the beginning, a street tree and overhead high voltage line conflicts are a key urban forest issue. Why? Well, it doesn't take much to know why. It's aesthetically unpleasing. At times it can jeopardize the health of the tree. Southern California Edison has very specific objectives. It's not that we can argue with them about those. We do have a good working relationship with the local manager, and we are working with them to find ways to maximize each of our resources for the benefit of trees. Yet at the same time, we have issues that we can't ignore and we need to start looking at. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Mandy, and she'll walk you through the report and answer questions. We're all here to answer questions, all three of us. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am pleased to get to present this report to you today. So before I get into the report, I just wanted to give a brief summary about what Southern California Edison does and why they do it. So they conduct annual vegetation and tree surveys to keep their lines clear for fire safety. Now, their mandates are set by the California Public Utilities Commission, and Southern California Edison has their own set of fire threat maps separate from the city's wildland fire maps that have designated areas of the city from anything from no fire threat to an extreme fire threat. So when it comes time to line clearance, the mandate is 4 feet from a line, vegetation cleared 4 feet from a line, in areas that are zoned as very high fire threat or extreme high fire threat, and then 18 inches for all other areas of the city. Now, in reality, sometimes trees are pruned beyond that to account for growth, and so they're not here every year. So the purpose of the project was to look at areas of our city with a high density of overhead utility lines and start to characterize the conditions of the trees located under high voltage lines, determine the number of vacant sites out there, since we were out on the street, wanted to capitalize on our information gathering. So we also looked at vacant sites that were across the street, regardless of if overhead utility lines were there. But we also wanted to characterize parkway and growing space conditions, ultimately developing and implementing actions that can help alleviate the conflict, improve our growing conditions, and continue to build a healthy urban forest. So 7 neighborhoods were surveyed. You can see up on the slide there. They really surround the downtown core. This is not the only area of the city where overhead utility lines exist. These are the areas where this is the greatest density, and this is a larger and more priority key issue for our urban forests than some of our other areas of our city. This accounts for about 30% of the general plan designated residential land. You'll see it's the west side, west downtown, Laguna, Oak Park, east side, upper east, and lower east neighborhoods were surveyed. So the information gathered included whether or not the site contained a tree or a vacant site. If there was a tree, we wanted to know the distance between the top of the canopy and the high voltage lines. This information allows us to determine the number of trees, if they're not already being pruned, when would they be pruned, and what actions can we take on a proactive level to alleviate that conflict. And again, the type of pruning, if any, again, this is characterizing the condition of the tree, providing us with information that if we can get in there and help inform our priorities and decisions, if we can get in there and adjust the practices so that the hard pruning techniques aren't employed by Southern California Edison. If it's a vacant site, if it's suitable for replanting. A number of our vacant sites exist out there, but we simply wouldn't go and replant a tree there. The conditions just aren't favorable enough. And again, parkway size and type by, I mean by, does it have a grass parkway, a cemented hardscape parkway, soil? And this gives us information for the level of effort it would take if we wanted to plant a tree. Some sites exist that we determined our opportunities. So just because it is cemented over and hardscaped over does not mean that a tree could never be planted there again. It means that potentially there's an opportunity to remove the hardscape and replant there. So we were looking at that as well. And again, grow space size. Size of a growing space for a tree can vary, and again, particularly when we're thinking about hardscape, and we want to improve those growing conditions if we can, and widen the growing space. So over 5,000 sites were surveyed. 3/4 of those were trees and 25% vacant sites. Of the trees surveyed, there's about 3,800 trees surveyed. 96% of those were under high voltage lines or a combination of high and low voltage lines. Less than 1% low voltage only, and about 4% of no lines. Again, of that 3,800 trees surveyed, about 612 of those are visually hard pruned. Just looking at the vacant sites, over 1,300 total vacant sites were surveyed. We estimate about 1,000 of those would be suitable for replanting, and about 50% of those are under high voltage lines. So this will inform our decision about what type of tree we would want to go and plant there. Now, site suitability was evaluated with Public Works traffic and street sign visibility criteria. And that takes into account underground utilities and then the visibility between for a driveway apron or an intersection or traffic and street lights. So we understand this is just one way to go and capture some information. Certainly, we would continue to evaluate on a site-by-site basis to determine if a site was suitable or not. But this was our first crack at that. And then we also, again, looked at whether or not those cemented areas were just opportunities for replanting. So this looks at our parkway conditions. By and large, grass and bare soil, which is a positive. That means the trees located in those parkways are getting the oxygen and hopefully the water that they need. And then again, cement parkways were of particular interest to this project. So the information, we gathered a lot of information here, and this is being summarized here. And by the way, each of these 7 neighborhoods has its own individual report. This is summarizing those reports. So 1,253 trees exist within 10 feet of a high voltage line. So one of our management options could be to grow out and proactively prune trees not currently hard pruned by Southern California Edison. You can see in the photo here, this tree is getting awfully close to that high voltage line up there. Are there techniques that we can go and employ today that would reduce the hard pruning that we saw in some of those earlier pictures? Another management option is developing a young tree training program. This was one of the actions developed in the Urban Forest Management Plan. And the idea is to prune those very young trees in a way such that we're training them to grow away from the high voltage lines. And again, reducing that conflict. Another option would be to remove hardscape to either create or improve those growing conditions, as you can see in that picture, and there's other areas within the city where opportunities might exist should the hardscape be removed. And this photo shows here a very small growing space. This tree could definitely have an improved growing environment with the removal of that hardscape around it. Another management option to permanently remove and replace trees that are in high conflict. As I mentioned before, about 612 trees are currently hard pruned. Some of these are very mature trees. They have just about everything going against them you can think of in terms of a very small growing space, and they're just not suitable in a suitable planting site. This information gathered from this report can help us make those management decisions on whether or not those trees need to be removed and not replaced at all, or what type of tree could exist in this environment. There's also this picture here shows a palm tree. We had 356 palm trees located under high voltage lines. Now, not all of those were being hard pruned. The one in the picture close to the utility pole there was. And these probably aren't the best tree to be placed under a high voltage line. And then there's some other trees that exist that are heavily pruned, and they've been, a large amount of material has been taken off one side, and it's leaving the tree lopsided and potentially a safety hazard.
I have a question about the agreement with SCE and a tree that, like these palm trees, if they were to prune them, really they'd be at removal. Do they have the right to remove without the city's approval? And is that second part of the question would be, is that an agreement we could make with them when that needs to happen, that it could maybe be done more on their dime than ours?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Longstreet. For the public, when a palm tree has one growing point, and when you cut that growing point off, it dies. To finish up with what you were saying there. Currently, we have a relationship with the area vegetation manager where he will, when the trees get to this point, remove the tree down to the ground. We grind the stump, and so it's kind of like a cooperation there. One of the key objectives key actions in the Urban Forest Management Plan is to develop a formal agreement with Southern California Edison for how we're going to deal with these situations. So we do have some informal things in place now, and we do have plans to develop something more formal with them in the future.
And one of the final management options is simply to replant those vacant sites. You can see here, located under high voltage lines, but still there are opportunities to plant trees. 524 trees we determined are suitable. They have no overhead utility lines, and they're just waiting for a tree. 524 was the previous. 542 have overhead utilities. Now, some of these are in cement, and maybe that we can remove some of that hardscape and improve their growing environment, but there are some opportunities out there. So next steps, evaluating our resource needs and the costs that will be generated from this, prioritizing the actions, considering the drought conditions, and again, securing the funding. And that concludes my report. I appreciate it, and we'll take any questions.
Great report. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? I have one when time. Yes, Mr. Casebeer.
Just curious, when it comes to replanting or planting a new tree under these wires, is there an approved list, or is this something that staff generates site by site by site, depending on the street tree, approved street trees, or how is that process done?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Casebeer, the City Council, when they adopted the Street Tree Management Master Plan in 1977, also adopted trees that were designated for various streets and sections. And at many meetings of this commission since that time, we've gone through changes to those designations. So there's a process that we can go through to have the designations changed when it's appropriate to do so. When we get to the point where we're looking at a situation like you saw with the palm trees, And if that section is currently still designated for palm trees, we need to make a decision. Is it wise to put a palm tree back in there? The answer to that may be yes in some cases, because those palm trees were probably about 70 years old. We have 70 years worth of tree there, and that's pretty good for a palm tree. So, but the answer might not be yes to that. It might be it makes more sense to change out the species, and we'll address those as we come to them. And it's another key action in the urban forest management plan to look at those kinds of things and where we can make changes to the street tree master plan.
Mr. Heaton, you had a question?
Yeah, just to kind of build a little bit on that and thinking of the palm situation when those trees do need to come out. To what extent is there sort of an advanced notice or discussion with Edison and is the property owners, are they consulted, advised, input sought as to what the next step will be and how long they'll be without a tree?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Heaton, Southern California Edison notifies us ahead of time when the trees are getting near the point where they'll need to be removed. And we evaluate those trees. In some cases, when we know sensitivities are out there that people would be sensitive to the removals, and we can buy a few more years, we work with them to say, can we keep these a couple more years? In those cases, we do contact the people and let them know that it's coming down the line. It's going to be at some point it'll have to be removed because there's no other safe way to keep the lines safe from the public getting electrocuted. One of the things, not only fire, but trees are full of water. Water conducts electricity. If the trees get into the wires, they can conduct that electricity down to the ground. If somebody touches a tree that's conducting that electricity, it's a safety issue for the person that touches that tree. So it's not just fire; it's electrocution safety and general public safety that we remove those. The municipal code allows for us to make decisions when it's a safety issue to remove the tree, and we don't have to go through a lot of noticing. We try to contact people when we can, but it isn't always. First, we're going to take care of the safety issue if it's an immediate concern. And when we do get calls from folks about those trees, we have conversations with them about how they can participate in the decisions about replacements. So we do some outreach and education in that way. It definitely could be expanded. There's opportunities there. So it's an area that we do need to improve.
Chair Wiscombe, if I could just add, one of the things we talked about when we presented the Urban Forest Management Plan to the Commission and to Council and other boards and commissions is the need to really update our street tree master plan. And that would be very much a public endeavor because it would provide opportunities for residents to engage in street tree designations and decision-making that hasn't occurred before at that level in the city. I mean, a lot of work has gone in over the years, but it would be an opportunity to go, okay, fresh look. We're looking for the next 30, 50 years. That's a tough thing to ask someone to do because often we want what we want right now, not what the tree will look like in 30 years. So some of it involves a little bit of visioning. If that effort does get funded in the near future, that would be another opportunity for more public engagement on street tree decision making.
Ms. Longstreet?
Yeah, the area I continue to struggle with is so many of those areas are constrained. The sidewalks are constrained, and a lot of those neighborhoods are very pedestrian-heavy areas. So that we be really cognizant of the safety of our residents on the sidewalk too. That some of those areas may not turn out to be as appropriate, as much as that adds an ambiance to walking. I mean, some of those sidewalks go down to less than 3 feet, which don't allow passage. So it's one that we've struggled with as a community since way back when we did the circulation element update. And we can continue to see the same issues all the time. Yeah. So I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but, our sidewalks are pretty much falling into disrepair right now all over the community. So we've got a number of issues facing our trees.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Clark.
Does Southern California Edison have the capability to go in and proactively soft prune, or is this like an airspace issue? They can't prune until the trees are in their space.
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Clark, the Public Utility Commission mandates all utilities to maintain the safety of their lines. And depending on how much voltage is going through the line, there's different distances that they need to maintain clearance. So it really is site dependent. Southern California Edison typically prunes to those standards plus enough so that the growth rate of the tree doesn't put the tree back into conflict within at least 1 year. So they're pruning a little bit farther than they have to, but it's preventing them from having to come back in a month or two to do it again. So it's reasonable that they do a little bit more in that way. Some of the things that we were talking about is looking at, can we, when we go through our maintenance area, do something a little differently with what we do to delay or prevent the tree from getting into a situation where it has to be hard pruned. We've got a number of trees that they're already being hard pruned, and that's a different kind of decision for those trees. But that's the reason for all this study, is to look at what we have and figure out ways that we can improve the situation.
I guess what I'm asking is kind of along the lines of what Bibi was saying. Is there a way to put it back on their dime? Like if they could prune a little bit more, or that it's like you're taking the onus if they know the tree is going to grow into their space.
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioners, there's guidelines about pruning trees, and those are based on how the tree reacts to the pruning. Normally, you wouldn't remove more than 25% of the live foliage in a tree, unless there's some really good reason to do that. Because if you remove more than that, the tree tries to grow faster to replace the leaves that it's lost in that pruning. So if they prune even harder, they're going to get an even harder reaction from the tree, which stresses the tree out harder, causes it to grow faster, causes them to come back in sooner because it's growing faster. So it's kind of there's a point at which you don't want to go beyond, because it just creates more issues than it solves.
Mr. Casebeer, you have something?
Mr. Downey, on my Southern California Edison bill, if you look in the fine print down there, there is a tax. I'm not sure if it's a tax that pays for this kind of pruning we're talking about, or is this something different?
Chair Wiscombe and Commissioner Casebeer, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. Maybe we can.
Edison isn't compensated. What is?
Chair Wiscombe, Commissioner Casebeer, there probably is a line item on your bill that relates to line clearance. It's a fee. I don't know, but it is paid by the ratepayer. The ratepayer pays for the tree work that occurs. I think what Commissioner Clark might have been asking is, can we go in and ask Edison to trim the other side too, so it doesn't look so lopsided? And I'll speak on behalf of Mr. Downey. We try. And we also try to know in advance when the work is going to occur, so that perhaps we can tag team, and the city would do some work and they would do some work. It can be a little challenging, as you can imagine, because they've got their idea of what their work program is, and we've got our work program that's over here, so sometimes there is a miss. I would also say that in the last 5 years, our effort and Edison's effort to work together has grown significantly. And so we're moving in a better direction. There is decades of tree trimming that already occurred, and we have some mature trees that have already been so significantly pruned. Like Mr. Downey was saying, coming back in and trying to balance that out might not be the best thing for the tree. So we're trying to sort of get at it from a number of different angles. And that's why in our urban forest management plan, one of the key things we need to do is develop a formal agreement. And we don't know what that would mean, whether it's cost share, whether it's work program, whether it's tree species planting, phased removal. There's a variety of things that we could put together in an MOU with Edison, hopefully, where we have a course of action into the future.
Okay. I had one question of Ms. Burgess, and just a really simple one. When you were looking at site status and suitability for planting, did you look at street signage also? Was that part of, because you talk about street lights and 25 feet from an intersection, et cetera, so.
Chair Wiscombe, members of the commission, yes, it does take into account.
Okay.
Well, it takes more into account street light and intersections, so signs at those locations. I don't believe this takes into account, in the middle of a parkway, a traffic sign. I can confirm that later.
That's okay. I was curious as to whether you went to that detail. Yes, Mr. Downey?
Chair Wiscombe, one of the aspects of most of the street signs that are in the middle of the block are for parking enforcement. It's rather easy to locate trees within constraints of being able to see those signs or even relocate the signs. It's not a large constraint to do that, and we do work with Public Works currently when we find those conflicts to see if the sign can be moved and avoid hard pruning of the trees to be able to see a sign. So it's a process that we're already doing, and it was less of a concern when we were doing the study for the high voltage lines and the hardscapes.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone else? I had a couple comments, and I thought this was just a really, really excellent report. And a very valuable document moving forward. This is like a precursor document to, it's really going to work well with a street tree master plan. It's really it gives a piece of the puzzle, especially on the vacant sites. And I also thought that, doing the vacant sites was really great. Because, it's just we have so many here in the city, and being able to identify them in particular neighborhoods was really great. And there is an opportunity. When I looked at the vacant sites, it was really interesting to me when you look at them by neighborhood and percentage of vacant sites by neighborhood, because it does help show. One of the things in the urban forest management plan was, what neighborhoods specifically, where do we need more trees? And I did the percentages on them, and it's pretty obvious, with the suitable vacant sites where we have an opportunity to concentrate our efforts to add more street trees when, we're post-drought. So I thought that was really great. And the other thing that I liked about it is, we have an opportunity now, if we prioritize some of these vacant sites that have hardscape, to even do the preliminary work during the drought, if we have the funds to do that, so that we're ready post-drought to actually get back, because we're not planting trees now, so we're behind. And so after the drought, we can resume planting on sites where there are priorities and neighborhoods where there are priorities. So, from that standpoint, I just I thank you for your efforts, because I think it's just a really great report that's going to provide a good document alongside the Street Tree Master Plan, and it gives us an opportunity to think more strategically about our urban forest. So, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, Ms. Rapp, do you want to take the Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse renovation status?
Madam Chair, we would estimate that the Cabrillo Pavilion item would be about 10 minutes. We did say on the agenda estimated time for golf was 5. We do have people here for that item, so it's up to you.
Well, if it's estimated time and not time certain, I think in its 10-minute presentation, and then that enables Ms. Zachary to have an evening.
Yes.
I think we should go ahead with that. And so let's move on to agenda item number 6, which is Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse renovation status report from Ms. Zachary. And then we will get to the golf item in probably 10 minutes or less.
Chair Wiscombe, members of the Commission, I will whiz through this. You're familiar with this project. It is an opportunity to take a slightly closer look at some of the work that we've been doing. As you know, we've been working on the renovation project significantly in the course of this calendar year due to the funding that was allocated from the former RDA agency, the bonds. And the Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse is a key recreational facility for our department, for our city. It's been here since 1926. It's been used by the public essentially since the day it opened, both as a bathhouse, a beach facility, a social area, recreation opportunity, any number of features. So essentially what our goal is through our work process to restore the facility. What I'm going to go through really quickly is some of the schematic design work, briefly mention historic landmarks, where we are with our project review and community outreach, some initial information about coastal hazards and sea level rise, and then the additional technical studies that are currently underway. So when we think about the pavilion and we think about its future and we think about its needs, we have a number of objectives. One, maintain its historical integrity. At the same time, we have failing building systems. It's been there since 1926. We have structural and seismic and access issues that need to be addressed. We have interiors that are no longer, particularly at the bathhouse floor, providing the kind of service to the community that we'd like. We also need to address site safety. That's a key feature of this project. How do we make the area safer so more people will want to come here, enhance our programming, and ultimately expand community use? Through the renovation project, our goal is to achieve LEED Silver status for the renovation, and I can tell you more about that at another meeting. When we were reinitiating the project, we sort of dug back in history and looked for old photographs, old documents, old references to how it's been used over time, and this just gives you a picture of really how it looked early on in its first 5-10 years as a beach and bathing destination. This photograph right here is the opening day of the wading pool, which is now the site of our soon-to-be completed new playground structure. We're all familiar with this type of visual and vision, and as you can see, there's open space on the second floor, and then back then, you could build slides like this, and there's not something that we'll do today, but there will always be a playground. There's been a playground at East Beach since 1928 in some way, shape, or form. It's also always been a community center, and things that happened when it first opened still happen today. There are luncheons, there are dinners, there are special events. I don't know how much dancing there is on a regular basis other than wedding receptions, but it's a very popular wedding venue. This photograph shows you The game room downstairs, so there was a place for children and adults to also play. In the 40s, it was the prime recreation area for World War II servicemen, and it actually was a place where they slept. We had cots on the second floor, and so it provided sleeping quarters. At the same time, it's changed. This is an example of what the second-story terrace enclosure looked like when it was constructed. Probably in 42, it was reconstructed in 47. The reason why? It's windy at East Beach, it's sunny at East Beach, it's cold at East Beach. It expanded the indoor area to be used. In the late 80s is when the accessibility improvements that you see today were put in, and this gives you a sense of the front. And then here's one of our access areas on the east side of the building. Interior, just on the top to give you a sense of what guided some of our interior design approaches, this is essentially what it looked like early on. This is the conference room, the lobby area that was originally called the tea room. So the whole area was open. Dance room in our sort of main special events area. And then again, here's the lobby of the bathhouse area. Over time, we have made changes. Here's an old photograph before the 1980s interior remodel. Today's challenges both speak to exterior, structural, just building failing systems, whether it's spalling in different areas, whether in the interior, as you can see, our showers no longer provide the function and the form that we would like. We love our bathhouse lobby, but it could really be improved, and there'd be opportunity to open the area up for more public use. So I went over these, so I won't go over them in great detail. I'll do that in the next couple of slides. But our ultimate goals are to expand public use, integrate our first and second floors, continue to provide our existing recreation programs, continue to provide a restaurant concession space, and enhance beach access. This gives you a sense of the site plan. The actual site doesn't change much at all. We're staying within the existing building footprint. We're just making some things a little different. We're going to improve the access on the west side of the building and also on the east side of the building, enhance the entry terrace, which faces East Cabrillo Boulevard, reconstruct the sidewalk and stairs on the east side, provide a service entrance to the first floor on the northeast side, have an area here that can be used for some sort of catering function, restore the east entrance to the building, and you'll see on a site plan how that will change on the interior, enhance the promenade, and then also enhance the portico. You can see these columns right now. We would actually return the portico to the original 1926 plan and bring it out 8 feet, but reduce the width of the promenade by 8 feet. So the footprint doesn't change. The actual area in which people can use the portico expands. This area would be opened up, better visibility into the play area, better visibility into the covered walkway, or stoa as it's called, and then also a boardwalk onto the beach to provide greater access to the beach. Showers, outdoor showers would still exist, and then we would enhance the parking lot to address today's accessibility standards. And the bathhouse floor, for those of us who are familiar with its interior, right now the men's locker rooms on the east and the women's on the left. We would locate both men's and women's shower and locker facilities on the west area, provide for a family changing area. We have a reception area right here, so control in and out of the facility would occur here. The staff offices are shown in purple. And then one of our goals, as I said, is open the area for public access. So we show a multi-purpose room here, and then a large multi-purpose room, which could be anywhere between 1 and 3 rooms, depending on how it's constructed on the interior. An elevator that would provide access between the 2 floors. And then there's a hallway that would lead back to another multi-purpose room. And then this is our east entrance, lifeguard and sports storage. And then the yellow area is a restaurant concession space, which is essentially the same square footage today that they have today. We would just flip the kitchen to this area, and then the dining area, indoor dining area, would be improved because it would actually have views out to the ocean. We're showing another small tenant space, which is yet to be determined. Access up to the portico is right here, so we would provide improved accessibility access. On the pavilion floor, there's not a lot one can do. However, we are proposing to open up the whole lobby, restore the lobby, remove the walls. The main special events room would remain essentially the same, some different interior improvements. The restrooms would be in essentially the same location, but we would actually have a hallway in between the two, so entry into and out of those restrooms would be more private than what we have today. We'd have a warming kitchen. Here's where the elevator would come up. And then this is the enclosed terrace. The enclosed terrace, this is actually an old site plan, would be a little bit smaller than it is today, but it would be renovated and reconstructed to have operable windows. And also provide the function that it does today. It's a key feature of the use of the first floor. This gives you a sense of the north elevation. Building should not look that much different than it does today. We are planning landscaping, and we'll have more. We have that information, but presented it at another date, just to let you know that we're also working on that. The terrace, just very quickly, this gives you a sense of what it might look like in a great, this is a computer-generated model. This gives you a better sense of the elevation. You can see how the terrace would be made shorter on either end. We'd restore original windows that were covered up when the terrace was enclosed. And as I said, operable windows. And there's some other aspects to the terrace design which we can go over at a future time. This gives you a sense that people will use this area pretty much the way they do today, but we're hoping there'll be more people for more hours for more length of time. We're also working on the lighting plan and other aspects related to exterior improvements. We've been to the Historic Landmarks Commission on 4 separate occasions. They've accepted our historic structures report. We've gotten positive comments and feedback and direction on the exterior site access, the building renovations in terms of the doors, the windows, the entryways, the terrace enclosure. We've also reviewed landscaping, lighting, and decorative metal. And at our last meeting, which was a month ago, we received positive comments, and we're actually on to Planning Commission. We'll have to go back. We're in concept review. There's still quite a few more steps with landmarks. It is a city-designated structure of merit, and it's eligible for the Historic Register. We had a community open house on September 3rd, and over 100 people in attendance, including some commissioners. Thank you. We produced a project fact sheet. It's on our webpage, as well as the presentation we provided at that meeting. I have a fairly healthy email notification list, so people will get notified as we move forward. And we anticipate when we get to the next phase of the project, we'll have another community meeting and get more feedback on where we are in the project. I mentioned coastal hazards, sea level rise. This is a complicated, lengthy discussion, so just a little bit of information, and we'll have more at the new year. We have to evaluate the vulnerability of the site and the building to both sea level rise and coastal hazards, so storm events, something that Santa Barbara's been dealing with since day one. We also have to develop an adaptation plan, so as sea level rise changes over time, so it comes inland, and as storm events become more frequent and perhaps more severe, we need to have a plan that shows how we're going to address that as it relates to the building and then also the surrounding site. Our preliminary findings is, as we know, we are already vulnerable. Sea level rise is not necessarily a factor tomorrow or in 10 years or in 20 years, probably further out. Part of that has to do with the fact that the city has a beach nourishment program via harbor dredging, and so this beach is considered a managed beach. We also have found, and this photograph is very small, that in the 30s, the city invested in quite a bit of shoreline protection all along East Beach. And we anticipate and believe that protection is still there. It's just buried under sand today and will play a role in protecting the building and the site in the future. We have more work to do to analyze that. Some of our preliminary look at adaptation strategies is beginning to monitor how the beach changes from year to year, season to season, and then looking at soft solutions. How do we find ways when we know in the winter months we might have more coastal storms? Do we protect the building without it being something that's permanent in place, but meets the need without affecting the surrounding site as well? So we were at City Council past couple of weeks getting approval to move forward with the additional technical studies we need to do to complete our development application and submit that. Archaeological, biological, and geotechnical soils analyses, and all of our consultants are busy working. They're underway. We hope that the work will be complete in late December. And when that happens, we'll be in the position to submit our development application to the city, since we do that just like anybody else would do, and also begin a conversation with the California Coastal Commission regarding how we're approaching sea level rise and coastal hazards. We've got a number of other big steps related to this project. We're only at step one, I said, in September, and we're really still at step one. It's just a very big step. Fundraising is something that we'll be looking at as being fairly necessary. We have $9 million, but we're looking at probably a $12 or $13 million price tag. We're working and reinitiating our business plan for the building, both when it's closed and when it reopens. And then we do have a restaurant concession there now, but at some point in the future, there will be a new restaurant concession or an RFP for a restaurant concession. So that's something that's out there in the future. But until we get to that, we have a lease agreement with East Beach Grill that remains in effect, and there's no changes to that at all. So with that concludes my very quick presentation, and the Commission will continue to hear a lot more about this project. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zachary. Great presentation. We always like to hear the progress made, and we'll look forward to continuing progress. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Okay. Thanks again. Appreciate it. We will move on to agenda item number 7, which is a status report on the municipal golf course. Ms. Rapp.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, the report that I am giving to you today is essentially the same report, a couple of additional slides that went to the Finance Committee on Tuesday. And we are scheduled to take this issue to the City Council to initiate the discussion about the golf course on December 9th. So tonight, we'll review the trends that are happening in the golf industry. We'll talk a little bit about how the city's golf course is operated and some of the financial projections. We've done a 10-year outlook that shows what the fiscal challenge could be depending on what happens with play. We'll talk about what the options are that are going to be discussed by City Council. And I included the information that the Finance Committee had asked us to return with because I think it's good to have as part of this conversation. They had asked us to make some comparison to how other programs and services within the Parks and Recreation Department are supported by the general fund. And we have included some information that we've been gathering on general fund support of municipal golf courses across the country and then especially in our local region. And very quickly, and this was covered in depth in the consultant's report that you had in your packet, just a quick overview of the different operating models, and then we'll talk about next steps. So the Santa Barbara Golf Club, I think it's important to start with this conversation because there are a lot of rumors out there about what the city is going to do with their golf course. And so I think we have to start the conversation with how important this golf course is to the community. The Santa Barbara community has been served by their municipal golf course since 1958. Throughout all of those years, it has continued to be a popular and valued recreation resource. It is a club course that is known for being well maintained and operated. We regularly get compliments on the condition of the course. We had 62,500 rounds last year. We've estimated that we probably have about 6,000 individual golfers at a minimum. And we estimate that we probably have around 1,000 golfers that regularly participate in clubs and organized groups that golf at Muni. We do know that we had 700 youth participants in our youth golf programs, and in fact, we've shared with you that by partnering with Chris Tallarico, the director of golf, and his staff, we have significantly expanded our youth golf programs. And they've grown by over 50% in the last 4 years. And we also know that about 35% of the play at the golf course is by seniors 65 and older. The course is home to Santa Barbara City College men's and women's golf teams, and from time to time other school teams as well. The current operating model for the golf course, and it has been this way since it was started, is that it's an enterprise fund. It does not receive general fund or tax support at all, and it operates off of the revenues generated at the course. So it's been very interesting reading the information over the last years about the trends in the golf industry. And so there is, in fact, a decline across the country in golf. Now, ironically, over in Europe and other parts of the world, golf is growing like crazy, but not here. And there is less interest in the sport of golf, fewer new golfers, people who are golfing are playing less frequently. And also in the probably late 1990s and the early 2000s, there was a significant expansion of golf courses across the country, and we saw it here in Santa Barbara. And basically, we have an overexpansion of the industry, so at the same time that we're seeing a decline, you have more courses competing for the people who are playing. We were very impacted by the recession across the country, and we experienced that here, and also across the country with all of the factors that are coming into play. Golf courses are competing with discounting their cost of the services and their promotions, and we are experiencing that here as well. National projections by the golf professionals is that golf is expected to be flat to, I would say, probably 1% is what I read more frequently than not. At the Santa Barbara Golf Club, our local market is very competitive, much more competitive every year. The higher-end courses are reducing their price point and competing and often beating our prices, and we're the municipal golf course, so a little different from what we used to see. Ventura recently, within the last few years, renovated both of their municipal courses, and so we have fewer people from Ventura coming north to play at our golf course, which we used to have, and we have people from this community traveling now down to Ventura more frequently to play at those courses. And of course, we had major construction in 2010, and combined with the recession, we got slammed hard. And so we lost a lot of golfers to other courses, and some of them have come back and others have not. So that's kind of what's going on with Santa Barbara Golf Course. And this chart really tells the story. It shows you, and whether you can read the numbers or not, it shows you what's been going on out at the golf course from 1982 through last year. And you can see that the peak times for the golf course, we were generating between 100 and 110,000 rounds a year in the late 80s up until about 1990. And then we started seeing declines. There's 1 year there in 91 where you could see they had a major drought and never really recovered back to the level of play that they had before. And then we continued to see a decline year over year. Glen Annie opened in 1997, and we began to lose some of our play to Glen Annie. And we had the recession, which affected us, as well as the major construction. The dark blue lines are the last few years, 2010 to 2014, and we are seeing that it is generally stabilized, and we would hope that we would continue in that vein. And in doing some of the reading, we see that, in fact, local municipal golf courses are, in fact, or public golf courses, whether they're municipal or not, that means they're open to the public, are starting to see maybe a little stabilization of play. But we don't know what the future holds. And I thought it would be helpful as we're having this discussion for people to have a better understanding of where we make our money and where we spend our money out at the golf course. So you can see that about 80% of the money that funds the golf course is fees that the golfers pay, greens fees, to play golf. So 80% of the money. About 16% of the revenue to the golf course comes from the two concessions that we have out there, the Pro Shop concession and the restaurant concession. And then we have minor amounts of money otherwise. Moving on, and the golf budget is generally about $2 million, roughly, a year. On the expense side, 50% of the expenses at the golf course, a little over $1 million, is the salary and benefit cost, because we do have city employee maintenance at our golf course. And then if you add the allocated costs and the supplies and services, that's about another 27%. Those are costs, that's general cost of doing business. Our debt is about 13%, and capital is about 10%. And so the one thing about the salary and benefit costs, if you watch other budget presentations by other departments in the city, that's pretty common to see that about half of the cost is salary and benefit costs. So it's not too surprising that that's what we're seeing out at the golf course. And it really is maintenance to maintain the golf course. So over the last few years, we have been actively working to respond to this financial challenge. So we have been very strategic in our price increases, sometimes increasing, sometimes not. Doing $1 to $3 per year in most cases. We have significantly and gotten more aggressive in our marketing and our promotions. With the approval of City Council and your support, we have refinanced the debt out at the golf course twice over the last 5 years. We have reduced golf maintenance staff by about 15% and cut where we could. We have eliminated some permanent positions and backfilled with hourly where we can. That is a very difficult. We're about average in terms of the size of our maintenance crew for an 18-hole golf course, higher than some, lower than others. We're like right in the middle. And so we're not overstaffed. I've been reading some of the comments that people are making. We're not overstaffed for a golf course. We have deferred capital equipment and major maintenance, although over the last year and this year we are not doing that anymore. We are not going to have the course fall into disrepair. That doesn't serve anybody. And so we are, in fact, reinvesting in capital and equipment replacement. And the reality is we have very little elasticity on the expense side to offset the revenue loss, because it really is a revenue problem. It's not an expense problem. It's a revenue problem. So this slide just shows what the golf fund reserves should be and were in 2012, 13, and 14. So we have been below policy reserves for the golf course since fiscal year 2008. And we are projecting that we could exhaust our reserves within the next 12 to 18 months. In this slide, the red bars are, in fact, what we should have looking at our budget projections going out to fiscal year 20, where we should be. The green line shows where the reserves would be if, in fact, we did see a 2% growth year over year. Now, mind you, we haven't seen that since 1990. And the lighter line in the middle, the blue line, would be if we had no change in play. So that's where the reserves would fall. And then if we saw a 2% decline in play, you can see that's a much sharper drop and puts us out of balance. And these scenarios do assume a $1 annual fee increase to the greens fees, which frankly we don't feel that's really sustainable, because we have to price competitively for the market, and we may or may not be able to do that. This chart really, I think, outlines what we know and what we don't know. So looking at the chart, it goes across the slide with, this is what happens if we have a 4% decline in play, a 2% decline in play. If we stay flat, a 1% growth and a 2% growth. And looking at our projections from 2015 to 2026, so 10 years, the two lines that are with yellow font across the top, 2018 and 2022, that is when we begin to pay off and retire two of our major debts. And that makes a big difference in terms of the financial outlook. Generally, we're looking, and the red is deficit and the green is going back into the positive numbers. So going back into the positive numbers is possible, and perhaps as early as 2023, when we pay off our debt, and if in fact we stay flat year over year, and if in fact we have increased our fees $1 a year. It is important to also talk about some of the other assumptions on this chart. This assumes that we would continue to have a city workforce, that we don't have drought impacts worse this year, and whatever that may bring in the next year. It does assume fully funded capital to keep up with maintenance. And it ultimately, when we look at this, it shows that the unbalance between our revenues and expense, the shortfall, is anywhere from $100,000 a year to $500,000 a year, or roughly 5 to 25% of our budget. And that, it's because we don't know what's going to happen with the play. And, I think if we were to at least stay flat, it's a better picture. But we don't know, given the history of what's been going on. So as we begin this discussion, it really makes sense to start with, one, whether or not the city wants to add some general fund monies to subsidize the golf course operation, similar to how other park and recreation facilities are subsidized for community use. That could either be done by doing a subsidy per year, perhaps looking at based on whatever the budget is for that year and covering whatever the shortfall is, or it could be moving the golf course from an enterprise fund into the general fund. So they're the two options. And then the other alternative is, and there are a number of different operating models, if the city wanted to look at doing something different than what we are currently doing, but all of them that would have an effect on the deficit would involve moving to non-city maintenance. So it's really general, it's a general fund discussion or contracting out maintenance. So, as I mentioned, the Finance Committee wanted to have a little bit more information on Parks and Recreation, and as you well know, the three divisions that are covered in the general fund are Administration, Parks, and Recreation. And the department, those three divisions in our general fund budget are subsidized by the general fund for a total of 63%. And then you can see it changes by division. Parks have a higher subsidy level, largely because our parks are available to the public. We don't charge people who want to stop in and go for a walk in a park. We do charge them if, in fact, they want to do an activity or an event, and also some of the revenue that comes into the Parks Division comes for services that Parks Division is providing, and the funding is coming, like, for instance, we manage the street trees, and funding to maintain that program partially comes from the gas tax, and so we get funding from that. The Recreation Division has the lowest level of subsidy, and that's because they have the highest revenue generating potential. But even at that, they're subsidized by 45%. And I think it's helpful to kind of understand how we look at that. When we charge fees for our activities and programs, the fees are intended to cover most, if not all, of the direct costs to offer that program. But depending on the activity, it may or may not, the revenue, contribute to the cost of those facilities, because that's your big cost, is what it costs you to operate the Carrillo Recreation Center, Los Baños Pool, Oak Park Wading Pool, all of that. So, and the other thing is that we look at the subsidy level for different programs based on what they are. So the city chooses to subsidize fully some of those programs which are a higher priority for the city to provide to the community. So the programs that are directed to youth, particularly low-income youth, particularly teens, senior citizens, some of our after-school programs, the after-school sports program at the 10 elementary schools, that is 100% subsidized. So the level of subsidy takes that into consideration as well. So we took 3 programs that had similar facilities, programs, target audience to do the comparison. So there's more detail in your staff report, but essentially we took Los Baños, the tennis program, and the golf course. For facilities, Los Baños has pools, shower lockers, weight rooms, offices, restrooms. The tennis courts, we have courts in three different areas. It has shower locker facilities at municipal restrooms. It has court lights with electrical costs. And when you get to the golf course, you've got an 18-hole golf course with a driving range and a pro shop and a restaurant. Program-wise, they really are pretty consistent in terms of offering organized programs, drop-in programs, and it really just depends to what degree the facility is supervised. So at Los Baños, it's supervised 100% of the time. If it's open, it's supervised. The same is true with the golf course. If it's open, it's supervised. Then for tennis, it's really, I would say, partly supervised and not intended to really be supervised. We have monitors who stop in and check to make sure that people have purchased their daily or annual permits. And if a staff person happens to be on site, they're available, but they're really not supervised. All 3 serve youth to seniors for their programs. You can see there's a big difference in the cost of the program. Golf has the much larger cost. It also has the much larger revenue that comes in. And so the general fund subsidy to Los Baños Pool is 56%, and tennis is 68%. And again, you can see that cost is really the cost to maintain and operate the facilities. On a participation basis, Los Baños has about 105,000 participations a year. Tennis, this is on the low end, but it's only an estimate because we know we have people that just stop in and play and we don't have staff available to count. But looking at the programs that we know are offered and the number of permits that are sold, we're estimating that at 37,500. And then golf, we're going with the number of rounds, 62,500 rounds. So it is interesting to look at how golf as an enterprise fund compares to 2 other general fund supported programs and facilities. And we have collected some additional information that we've found on municipal golf trends. And there was an article that the National Golf Foundation did called Emerging Trends in Municipal Golf. This is back in December of 2013, that found municipal courses play an important role in community golf. We would all understand what that role is. Muni courses that are operating as enterprise funds are increasingly unable to meet their expenses. And the trends that they're seeing, the first is that there is increased outsourcing of golf operations and course maintenance to the private sectors, that there is forgiveness of large debt accumulated by the golf course, that's been forgiven by the general fund. So if it was general fund money that was a loan, and we do have a loan from the general fund, or whether they absorbed and took on that debt themselves. And then there are other cities that are folding the golf operation back into the general fund. And then looking locally, we are just in the process of collecting more information on this, but Mark Sewell, our business analyst, was able to pull out this information from the cities of Oxnard and Ventura, their annual CAFR, which is a required financial report that that they make available on their website. And it shows that those two courses have actually received a subsidy from the general fund over the last few years and is continuing as far as we know. So all of those courses, Ventura and Oxnard have, Ventura has 2 courses. Oxnard is River Ridge, and so there are 2 courses. But they are all operated by golf management companies, so they don't have any city maintenance. They are well run and competitively priced. They are our competition. They have heavy debt due to capital investment, and they've had subsidy, which has been provided by the general fund in recent years. So you can see, again, they have a larger operation than we have. We're 18-hole. Here we'd be talking at least 36. But you can see that in Oxnard, it was in FY13, $1.3 million, and in Ventura, $500,000. So this is very preliminary information. We've actually been asked to see if we could pull a little bit more information. But clearly we are seeing the trends that we're seeing elsewhere in California and the country, we are seeing here as well. We're not the only ones struggling. So very quickly going through the operating models, and again, the Golf Consultant Report goes through this in great detail. The current Santa Barbara Golf Club model is called a hybrid. It has city maintenance and concessions that are private operators that provide golf operations. In our case, that's Chris Tallarico and Channel Islands Golf operates the pro shop and provides director of golf services. And Mario and Lainey Medina with Mulligan's, who have the concession for Mulligan's Restaurant for food and beverage. And the city provides the management. And looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the current model, I am not going to go through these in depth, but this model that we currently have, really the strength is that there's a high level of city control. And the greatest weaknesses are we have the higher public sector salary and benefit cost. The current model, because we have 2 contractors and the city, it limits our ability to respond to the dynamic market that we find ourselves in, and potential conflicts with multiple concessionaires. And we have great relationships with both of our concessionaires, so this is not about that we have issues. It's more about when you're trying to make a quick decision that involves 3 different business entities that all have something in the game, it makes coming to those decisions much more difficult than if you had one person or one entity that was making those decisions. And 6%, we did ask our consultant if he could give us a sense of the municipal golf courses, how many are in the various models. So on each of these slides, as we go through, you'll see this says 6% of municipal courses. This is Southern California because those were the courses that he was most familiar with and could pull that information. So 6% of the municipal courses have Santa Barbara's model. This next model, the hybrid, the only difference is that it has contract maintenance, and that's really the only difference. And the only real difference in strengths and weaknesses, obviously you would have lower cost of private sector maintenance, salary and benefits, and on the other side, you now have 3 entities that the city is negotiating with when we're trying to all come to a decision. And again, you would still have a need for city to be fairly involved in monitoring all of the performance and contract compliance with the operation of the golf course. And 6% of municipal golf courses are using this model. The management agreement is the most common model being adopted by municipalities today. So they are often moving from other models to this model. It entails a management company that would come in and operate the golf course for the city. This is different from a facility lease. They would, it's a professional golf management operation. They are running the city's golf course for a management fee as well as performance incentives. But it is still, the city is still responsible for all of the expenses and all of the revenues. But they're operating the course with private sector employees. And so the strengths are that you have professional golf management, and you have the benefit of private sector wage and benefit, and on the negative side, you still have the level of risk to the city. It's still our revenue and our expense. But 23% of the municipal courses are in this model currently. Then we have the facility lease, which is much less common today, although you'll see when we go to the next slide that it is the larger percentage of municipal operations today. In the facility lease, you have a lease with a private operator, and they are operating the golf course with really an arm's distance from the city. The city is not going to be involved in setting prices, and there's much less management oversight of a lease. And it is a model that is more common when there is a requirement for a significant capital investment into the facility, and the assumption is that you need to have a longer-term lease that would allow the private entity to recoup their initial expense. So 57% of municipal courses are a facility lease, and most of those have long-term leases, 20 to 30 years. Most of them were negotiated years ago. And in fact, the consultant report states that in many of those cases, the lessee has gone back to the municipality to renegotiate their lease terms due to the soft golf market today and what's going on financially. And then the last model is just there because it is a model that is seen, and it's a full self-operation with the city providing all of the services, with the exception that in some situations they have a restaurant concession. And we did not feel that that was an appropriate model for the city to look at this point. And then this summarizes the economics of what it might look like for the city if, in fact, we had a different model from what we have currently and looking at our income and expense in 2014. So This shows that in our current model, we're not meeting our expenses by $109,000, and we drew off of our reserves to cover that. In the management agreement, it would it's a projected savings on the expense side of almost $425,000. And with the hybrid with contract maintenance, we would have the living wage ordinance, which would come into play with that, and that would show just under $200,000 in annual savings to what the city is currently doing, and a facility lease is right about in that same area. In the report, the tables showed the application of the living wage ordinance to all of those models, pretty much. And the city attorney has provided an opinion for us that basically the way that the city's living wage ordinance is written, there is an exemption for recreation services. The management agreement would be a management agreement for recreation services to manage the golf course, and it would not apply to the facility lease as the city's ordinance is currently written. And we're talking about people, and these are our coworkers. They are a hardworking staff. As I said before, most of them have worked for the golf course for 15 or more years. We have 10.3 full-time equivalents of permanent staff. That's 11 people. And we have 1.7 FTE hourly staff, 4 people. We have I have met and spent time on a regular basis. I have met with the golf staff talking about the challenges that we've been having out here at the golf course, and I let them know we were going to start this discussion. And SEIU has been informed that these public discussions are taking place. The city has made a commitment that if contract maintenance is approved, the existing golf maintenance staff will be absorbed into other city operations. No one will lose their job, but it will mean that they won't be working in their current profession, which is golf course maintenance, but they'll be working in similar jobs within the city. So in terms of a decision, because we are not at the point where we're in the red. The golf course still has reserves. It's just that if we continue on the track that we are, we have a problem coming, and we need to talk about what we want to do. The other thing that is coming into play is that the 2 concessions agreements that the city has with the pro shop and the restaurant, they end in June of 2016. And so we need to have a decision, and we need to have new contracts in place so that we have a smooth operation of the golf course. So no matter what we're going to do, we need to know what that decision is by June of 2015, so with this budget year, because we will need a year to develop the RFPs and go out to contract, whether it's in the existing model or something else. And so we are asking council for direction by May or June of this year. As I mentioned, we were at the Finance Committee twice. They'd asked us to come back with additional information, and we were there on yesterday, feels like a week ago. And we are scheduled to go to the City Council on December 9th at 6 p.m., and we'll be having that discussion with them. And then the Finance Committee, these are some of the comments that they made, and I think it's important because I think it's what we would expect. That the golf course is an important community recreation resource, that there is a need for more information. We are just starting this discussion. That there is need for public outreach and broad input before a decision is made. In reading and hearing, we've been getting phone calls and emails. People feel like a decision is imminent. People feel like a decision's already been made. And, there will be more opportunities, and the council meeting on December 9th is a good opportunity for the public to come and speak to this. The recommendation, there are 3 members on the City Finance Committee. It was a 2-1 vote, with the recommendation being that the golf course should remain self-sustaining over the long term, which may include contract maintenance. But all of them spoke to the value of the community golf course, and that we need to protect that as we go forward. So, yes.
When you say when they recommend it should remain self-sustaining, does that mean with or without general fund, as an enterprise fund only, or would self-sustaining include general fund subsidy?
It could include general fund subsidy, or it might be that it needs to have a model that would put it in a position of not needing general fund subsidy.
Do you know what their recommendation?
I would assume from the conversation that the 2 members that voted in support of the recommendation would see contract maintenance before going to the general fund. And I think the concern is there are already a lot of demands on the general fund, and our department being one of them, and still playing catch-up from the recession. And the concern for drawing more from the general fund for a new need, which is coming forward. That would be my assumption. And I think there will be a lot of discussion about this on both sides.
Thank you very much for the report. It is really, really thorough and a good recap of an explanation of the whole report that was prepared by Proforma. Really, really good. Appreciate it. I don't think we have any public comment, so I'm going to. Do we have any public comment or? No. Okay. I gather it's a no. So I'm going to open it up to the commission for any questions and comments, and we might just go down the line, or do you want to start, Mr. Heaton?
And Chair Wiscombe and commissioners, maybe, because I did discuss this with Chair Wiscombe, so let me just add it. You are not being asked for any input at this time. And we are going to City Council on December 9th. If you want to have comments, we will take notes and we can share some of the themes, just as I did with the Finance Committee, what those themes were. We do expect that if Council were going to take this forward, that they would most likely want to have a recommendation from the Golf Advisory Committee and the Park and Recreation Commission before they would consider, making a change to the golf course. And what we would most likely do in that case, and I did mention this to the Golf Advisory Committee, we would probably have a joint meeting with the Golf Advisory Committee and the Park and Recreation Commission so that you each bring your different perspectives to the discussion. So again, this is a status report, but if you have general comments, we'll be taking notes and we can share those as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. I should have made that clear. So I'll just go down. If you have questions or comments we'll just go down the line.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and sharing that very thorough, sort of information-heavy, numbers-heavy report. I had a question, and just looking for a little bit more information or clarification on what the living wage ordinance, how that plays in. And one of the things I saw was that the current hybrid model is not subject to the living wage ordinance, is what it said in the report. So I was just a little confused at how that factors in for what the current situation
So
is.
in a very general way, because I am not the expert on the living wage, the city adopted a living wage ordinance that applies to some contracts, but not all contracts. It requires that contractors providing service to the city have to pay a minimum hourly wage that's actually at a higher level. But if they pay a lower level, but they provide very specific levels of benefits to their employees, then that is acceptable. And those are dollar amounts in the living wage ordinance. That is language that goes into various contracts and agreements that the city has with private operators. So it depends what the service is that's being provided. So, for instance, when we as a department contract for tree maintenance, landscape maintenance, custodial services, all of those contracts are subject to the living wage. So the city's living wage ordinance. The restaurant is exempted, and the pro shop is exempted by the nature of the business, and beyond that, I'm not really a very good expert to speak. And
I think it's actually related to contract amount, isn't it? That's my understanding. That it's
plays a smaller. It wouldn't come into play for this,
right?
Yeah. So, I'm sure that this will be part of the discussion going forward. If we are to come back and it's a bigger part of the discussion, I certainly would have somebody who is better to speak to it available to you. But I think ultimately it's at the city council discretion because it's an ordinance set by city council.
Do you have anything else? No? Ms. Longstreet?
This was very thorough, and I think our first responsibility is to keep our resource available to the public. So whatever we're looking at, however the modeling comes out, and that means keeping it financially alive also. So we have to be responsible in the model we look at to keep it sustainable. So I agree with what the Finance Committee recommended. I would be concerned in any model where we didn't have any say over fees, and that would just concern me. And as far as the living wage goes, my feeling is many of the exempt positions we have within the city, as I recall, were to maintain the ability to employ summer youth, to staff our camp programs, those kinds of jobs, the temporary incoming jobs for young people or even senior workers who are not supporting a family. I would hope that whatever model we went to, and if contract labor comes in, those are people that are going to be supporting families. So ethically, I would have a hard time not complying with our own living wage ordinance. So, those are the concerns I have with it. I remember we went through a great deal of discussion when living wage was coming on board because it would really impact our workers that are, college students that come for a summer job. And that could we provide camps at a reasonable cost if we if our employee costs doubled. So those were kind of work experience jobs in a sense to me, and this should not be. This should be an experienced person doing an important technical kind of maintenance on a golf course. So I wouldn't want to see it go to less than living wage. Otherwise, I think there's going to be many parts of this that'll pan out over time, but I do think it has to be dealt with. It is a huge resource that we have, and not looking ahead could put us in some serious trouble with our maintenance and future operations.
Thank you. Ms. Clark, do you have anything, or are you? I know you've already asked questions, so.
I think I'm good for now.
Okay, Mr. Casebeer.
It's a valuable resource, and we need to keep it available to the public and financially solvent as well. And I think it's going to be a highly volatile subject to the public. A lot of people aren't wanting to take from the general fund, and a lot aren't going to want to relinquish control of the golf course and operation. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Mr. Casebeer.
It is a complex issue, and one thing that I would like to be incorporated in these remarks is the importance of the youth programs. The golf course has a long, long history. Russ Morrison golf program has been in existence for a long time. And so I would want to preserve the ability of our youth to participate at the golf course. Otherwise, we're shooting ourselves in the foot for these are our future golfers. And so give them a chance to come play and experience the wonderful opportunities there. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I agree with everything that's been said. This is a public asset, and I think it needs to remain a public asset. What Mr. Casebeer said, I was going to comment on too. We have a very impressive youth program at the golf course, which has increased by participation's increased by about 50% in the last 4 years. So this is, these young people are going to carry the torch for golf in the future. And, those programs need to be protected. What Ms. Longstreet said about, we need to have, it needs to be self-sustaining. It needs to be financially viable, and that's the concern here. It's going, it pains us when we talk about our employees at the golf course. I know some of them are golf, and they've been in golf all their lives, and lives might be affected by decisions here, and that's a very tough decision. But I also agree that there are models here where the city retains control, and there are models here where the city loses control, or I hate to use the word loses, gives up some control. And I think that the models that will work best for the city to retain this as a public asset, to be able to establish the fees and react, and to help our youth programs, to increase our senior golf, which is already phenomenal now, to help us promote golf with our tourists. We're bringing in more and more tourists. The transient occupancy tax was up some incredible percent just in the month of October. So, these are all things that we can do under a model that retains some city control, no matter what model we use. So I think they're important to look at. But I thank you for the report, and I think it's a really good start moving forward to making sure that the golf course is a self-sustaining public asset. So,
one thing I would add, I read the entire report. The rumors are flying around right now, and I would really hope that everybody would take the time to read this and and have some civil discussions instead of going to us versus them or whatever, so that we're all in this together. We've got to solve this together. And I think oftentimes that doesn't happen, and so we have some time to do that. I'm glad this is here early, and I really hope that people do the research, the golfers, that it's, to learn about the different issues we're facing and help us to make intelligent decisions.
Well, and it's also good because it's going to be part of a city council budget discussion, which is, it's at a very appropriate time. It's not going to be at an odd time of the year. So I think it helps smooth out the rough edges of the decisions that are going to have to be made. Okay, thank you all. Thank you very much for the report. And Mr. Sewell, thank you very much for all the preparation you did on it. I know you did a lot of work on it. And with no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.